I'm originally from Trenton, New Jersey, and how I came about being born there. My dad went to a concert, and at this James Brown concert, right before he goes inside, he sees a young lady sitting inside of a car. My dad starts to go out to hang out with her at the cotton gin yard, goes to her high school, and he gets on his knees and proposes to a 15-year-old little girl. And she says, "I'll marry you, but I have to ask my daddy." So they go back out to the cotton gin yard, and he gives him permission, and she gets pregnant. And guess who's inside of her belly? Me. And unfortunately, my father went back to his old ways. He hits the streets and he's just going crazy. And it's really traumatizing for this now 16-year-old girl with this little boy. But as time went on, guys, it was so hard for me as a child. I didn't know how I was going to survive. And that's the reason why in my mind I was thinking, so what am I going to do? So I started watching sports on television. And I was like, oh my God, look at all the people cheering for those guys. I want to be like them. And then when mom and dad would go to work, as kids we get kind of nosy. I snuck in my dad's bedroom and I looked inside of his closet and there was his magazine, and the listeners won't know this magazine, it was called Hustler. I opened that Hustler magazine up and I saw these beautiful butt-naked women. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna marry one of them. Well, as time goes on, I already now have a porn problem because I like watching and looking at naked women. He also had these different videos where I was watching people have sex. I had a sex problem even as a child, even though I was a virgin. So I watched sex every single day. If it wasn't for sports and watching sex, then my father was also a gambler. So I learned how to gamble when I was a child. And I can just go on and on with this, but it was a very traumatizing lifestyle that I was living in with a dad that was abusing a mother every single day, with a father that was just cussing and screaming and yelling. The only thing I would say good about my dad at that time is he made me work my butt off in sports. The young lady that I was wanting to date in high school, she was a senior, and I decided to lose my virginity on her graduation night at high school. And so we go to a 7-Eleven or wherever they were selling condoms at, but they didn't have YouTube back then, so I didn't know how to put one on. And guess what happens? We go to a park and by a lake. My first time out, I didn't know how to put the 3 condoms on. She gets pregnant. Her father tells me, young man, my daughter's pregnant. You need to quit football and sports and come and take care of my daughter and take care of the child that's going to be born. I said, dude, I got goals and dreams to be famous one day. He said, then if you don't quit sports, you can't see my daughter anymore. And they didn't say this back in those days, but today's term would be, bye Felicia, I got goals. I can go on, but I'm gonna do a long story short. All of a sudden, I get a phone call from the Denver Broncos. Second pick, second round, the Denver Broncos drafted me. I've made it. Here I am, my identity is achieved. So I get on the airplane, I'm flying out to Denver, Colorado. I'm thinking in my head, okay, so the Vance that was growing up can't be the Vance that lands in Denver. 4th and final preseason game. Here I am on the Denver Broncos, and all I have to do is just catch a punt. So any San Francisco 49er fans are gonna love this, what I'm about to say. Our last 4th and final preseason game was in San Francisco against the 49ers. And all I had to do, because we were winning the game, was catch a punt on the 10-yard line, and the game was over with. Well, the ball's getting ready to come down, and I'm thinking in my head, all the media's here, they're gonna take pictures, ESPN, I'm gonna catch the ball with my eyes closed. And then I thought to myself, because then I'll be on the front page. Again, it's about me. So the ball's coming down, and I say, no, it's the last play of the game, I'll just catch it. I dropped the ball anyway. It rolls in the end zone, and San Francisco scores a touchdown and wins. And my teammates were like, oh my God, Vance, dude, your career's over with. You can't drop a punt on the final play of the preseason and make the Broncos. You can't make it in the NFL. So going home, I knew I was gonna get cut. And they said the very next morning, the final cut, we all had to show up for the cut. Well, I got in the car with my teammates and we all stopped by a liquor store, and I had my first drink, and I was like, whoa, oh my goodness. I ain't never felt so good in my life. And I didn't get cut. So now I'm already an alcoholic because I drink every day. I met a young lady, we came downtown Denver, Colorado. We were partying, and she said, you ever smoked weed before? I said, no, I never had no weed. She said, finish drinking that soda pop out of that can. I was like, what does that have to do with weed? I was high and drunk. We go back to a hotel that night, and you already know what happened the rest of the night. And guess what happens? My 3rd time out, she gets pregnant. So I've got a saying, transparency is transformation. Transparency is transformation. So now here I am, a Denver Bronco. And by the time the first quarter, second quarter's up, I ran my high off because I got high every night on Saturday night. And I ran it off by halftime. and John Elways was a very good quarterback. So I wasn't gonna drop no pass. And that's the reason why all my fingers are dislocated like that and broken, because of how hard John Elways threw the ball. And then I would get mad at him about throwing the ball so hard, and he would say, Vance, I'll tell you what, I'll throw the ball a little bit softer to you, and then you can catch it and they can just knock your head off. I said, never mind, John, just throw it hard, just throw it hard. I ended up, guys, getting married to that young lady that I didn't want to have an abortion because she was pregnant, and I didn't want to do like I did to my other kids who I abandoned. One of my teammates says, how's our girl Ange? I'm like, Ange, who's Ange? And my other teammate says, Angela, big freak. I'm like, that's my wife. My teammates were screwing my wife. And that's why I'm not gonna mention who they were. Well, I came home, guys, and I literally grabbed her and I threw her across the bed after screaming and yelling at her for cheating on me with my teammates. And she hits her head against the closet door, and my wife is laying on the floor and she's dead. And I run over and I'm trying to push her lungs. I'm pushing her in the chest. I'm blowing air into her mouth, and she's not breathing. And all of a sudden she starts to breathe. All of a sudden she starts breathing. And I looked at her and said, I wish you were effing dead. People only saw the edited version of Vance Johnson on the field. But off the field, because of the head trauma, because of the injuries, and the trauma as a child, I really didn't do well off the field. And that's why I leaned on addiction to cope with life. I had, during my career, out of 10 years in the NFL, 3 Super Bowls, I had 3 women pregnant at the same time. And let's get back into my game now. So again, on the football field, I was doing okay, and I was happy when I was making touchdowns. But I literally, when the game started coming to the end, if it wasn't us trying to win the ball game, and we were already winning and the game was over with, all I was thinking about was what I was going to drink and what I was going to use off the field. Unfortunately, when I would leave the game, I literally, depending on whether we lost or not, would go out a certain way outside of the stadium so I can get in my car, because I started using as soon as I got in my car. Long story short, one of the Super Bowls I went to, when I came back home, I was so broken after the Super Bowl, and it wasn't because we lost, it was because it didn't really mean anything, that I literally got in my closet, and I need to show you guys this, but I tried to kill myself. This is one of my accidental times trying to kill myself during my career. And my mother actually gave me a call one night. Actually, this is one of the worst times, but there was a time prior to that when I was cutting my wrist, and my mother called me and stopped me. But all through my career, I was so suicidal, to the point where I had motorcycles that I would be driving, and I would hope someone would run a red light so they can just kill me. So I really struggled through my career, and the only time I was happy was I was on the football field making touchdowns. At the end of my career, 10 years, I went to go be with the San Diego Chargers for just a couple of months, but I was using out there, and so the coach ended up cutting me. They called me on a Sunday and had to let me go because I was using out in San Diego, California. And I even went to Minnesota, where I got traded there for a time, but they only did that because it was about money. And eventually I was so done with my life that I decided to, just like the Antonio Brown guy that the other day you guys saw running off the field, he literally was just running into the problem. Well, guess what? I did the same exact thing. I just didn't show back up. I was supposed to go sign another 3 or 4 year contract with the Broncos, and I just didn't. I said, yeah, I'll show up on my birthday and sign another contract with you guys. I was done. And so then I used to wake up, I used to get through the day, I used to go to sleep, and I had pornography problems, I had sex problems where I was having sex with women all day long, and it got to a point where I had to go to the hospital a few times, and so I decided to move to the western slope of Colorado, where eventually we opened up a restaurant called the Vance Johnson's Outlaw Ribs, and again, it was just all about me. But I will say that my oldest son decided to come over and spend time with me. My son called me one night and was asking for a ride. I didn't answer the phone. I just heard that he was reaching out to me because his car had broken down and he needed to go see his mother because his grandfather had just died of cancer. Well, I didn't respond to my son, and my son ended up taking his motorcycle across the mountain. But that very night that my son left, he got killed. My son got ran over by a drunk driver. That morning, my ex-wife gave me a call, and I didn't even believe her at first. And then what do we do when we lose somebody? We lean on the very thing that got us through what we thought was getting us through life. That's our addictions. As time goes on, I'm so out of my mind because of the loss of my son. I'm drinking more, I'm using more, I'm even having more sex problems. It got to the point where I called my mother one night and said, Mom, I just want to die, and I'm going to die tonight. And my mother actually took me into the hospital driveway area. I got out of the car and I was barely making it to the door. And once I walked inside of the door, I OD'd and fell on the ground. They had to put me into another ambulance because at that hospital they couldn't induce me into a coma. They took me up to Vance Johnson and put me in the hospital there. And on day 24 of my 28-day coma, they told everyone to come out and say their goodbyes to Vance because Vance's body is shutting down and he's going to die within hours. My sister flew out from Washington, D.C., and she took a deathbed picture of me. They took me off the ventilators, they propped me up, put oxygen in my nose and these wires to just watch my body shut down. And my mother told the doctors, God's not done with my son yet. And everyone looked at my mom like, are you crazy? Your son's gonna die. They looked at her like that, they didn't say that to her. Day 28, my eyes opened. When my eyes opened, I asked my mother and father, did ex-wife so-and-so come visit me? Did ex-wife so-and-so come visit me? They were like, yeah, Vance. I said, did pastor so-and-so come pray over me? And did pastor so-and-so come pray over me? They're like, Vance, yes, well, what are you talking about? You were in a coma. Guys, I want people to know that there is a spirit living inside of you. The spirit inside of me saw the people that visited me, that were saying their goodbyes to me. I even knew the language coming out of their mouth because the spirit inside of me was conscious, but my body was dying. Eventually, when I left the hospital, I actually, after staying clean for a short time, overdosed again, and over again, I just kept relapsing. I'm driving to a canyon one day and I'm screaming and crying out to God to save me because I couldn't do this. People were looking at me and recognizing that I was Vance Johnson, but they thought that I was losing my mind because I was going crazy. Eventually, I got a call from my 7th ex-wife, and she said to me, the Lord has put it in my heart that you need some help. And I hadn't even seen her in a long time. And I said, yeah, well, I'm struggling. So the NFL decided they would pay for my treatment. And I decided, because of my ex-wife reaching out to offer me help, and the NFL saying we'll pay, and Randy Grimes, I got on an airplane and I flew out to go to treatment. Day 14, I decided to leave treatment. I'm standing there looking across the fence thinking AMA means leaving against the medical advice. I was either going to climb the fence or call my mother and tell her I need to fly back out of Florida. And all of a sudden I heard a noise inside of my head. It said, Vance, go back in and listen. And I was like, who is that? I don't talk like that. I would never say that to myself. And so I looked across the street, and this is the true story, guys. There was a church with a cross on top of it. And I said, okay, God. So I go back inside and I start listening to people's stories, and I start identifying my life with theirs. And I start seeing, Vance, just because you got famous doesn't mean you didn't grow up around the same trauma and issues that these other kids that are here in treatment grew up around. So I can identify. So then I opened up to my therapist, I opened up to my counselors, and I was just so transparent that I literally start to understand that there are problems all over this nation and the world with addiction. Eventually, they gave us these recovery Bibles, and they also offered to take us to church. Now, growing up, I called myself a believer of Jesus Christ, but I wasn't a follower. At this time, I started opening up scriptures and I started reading things that started reminding me of my life during my addiction. Proverbs 14:12 says this, there's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death. Didn't I say I was doing what I thought was right since I was a kid? All the way to the top, being famous? And I tell people it's like a professional athlete climbing to the top of a ladder thinking, when I get to the top, I'm gonna be successful, I'm gonna be great, I'm gonna have an identity. But when you get to the top, the only place to go is where? Down. And athletes and famous people, we don't climb back down, we jump off head first. And that's why you hear about so many athletes and famous people committing suicide and dying after their careers or after they're not famous anymore. The promise I made God that I would go back home for the rest of my life, and the very place I wanted to go to was Denver, Colorado, to number one, apologize to the state for using them for my fame, but now say I want to come give back. And now the whole nation I want to do that to. Another thing I did when I got out of treatment, I started reading the Bible again, and there was a book called Hebrews 5:7 that said when Jesus was in the flesh, doing his ministry, they were trying to kill him all the time. And it said that he cried out to the one that could save him from death. Didn't I say I was driving through the canyon crying out to God? To the one that could save me. I didn't know that was in the Bible. And it said he was heard because of his reverence. So guess what? I'm back in Colorado to tell everyone that knows my reputation, God forgave me for my sins, and he'll forgive you too. So let me be a part of something to give hope here in Denver, Colorado, and all over the state, and including this entire country, because my brother Tim, with his testimony and him and I being friends now, and his platform, he's reaching the entire nation. And so I want to be involved in his life and his son's life for the rest of my life. I really would like to close with this. For all of you guys that are watching, I just want to say I love you. And remember, an identity is actually not achieved, goals are. Your identity is received. And so I just give God praise. I love all of you.